you. Please be seated. Hereby I open the academic ceremony in which Yan Jia will defend the academic thesis Doing HANFU, an ethnographic study of embodied meaning-making practices of contemporary young Chinese. The floor is open to you.
Dear Prorector, dear members of the committee, dear family, friends, colleagues, and online reviewers, thank you so much for being here and for attending online. In the next 15 minutes, I will give a brief summary of my thesis, Doing HANFU, an ethnographic study of embodied meaning-making practices of contemporary young Chinese. On November 22, 2020, in Beijing, China, groups of young people wearing Asian-style HANFU clothing walked along the street. When they met each other, they made a 作揖 gesture like this and addressed each other as 同袍, meaning same robe. Well, they often encountered questions from passers-by, such as, who are you and what are you wearing? After 1 month, a conversation happened in a WeChat group called Girls from the Great Ming Dynasty. It started from addressing, are there any girls from the Great Ming Dynasty? The girl from the Great Ming Dynasty is going home. So who is the girl from the Great Ming Dynasty? There were also other types of online chit-chat in the group, like HANFU brand recommendations, or to ask a question. And in this question, one is addressed at the Xungtai, a respect form of addressing male friends from the past, but it was used in their conversation and in modern China. On October 11th, 2022, in Den Haag, the Netherlands, a group of young people wearing HANFU, and they gathered in a restaurant and played the choosing flower game. They rolled a die to select their bookmark, and each featuring hand-drawn flowers and the flower's name and 2 lines of a classical Chinese poetry. After choosing, they read the poem loud and appreciated its meaning together. So who are they, what are they wearing, and what are they speaking or writing, or in one word, what is this group of people doing in Beijing, China, and the Netherlands? So driving by this general inquiry, this dissertation asks the central question: how do self-defined HANFU fans negotiate and construct identities in relation to HANFU through embodied meaning-making practices, while being shaped by their social environments and the living conditions in Beijing, China, and the Netherlands? To answer this question, this thesis follows 2 theoretical lines. The first one is ethnography as a thick description. According to the famous anthropologist Clifford Geertz, an ethnographic study is really our own constructions of other persons' constructions of what they and their competitors are up to. So following this line, thick description of self-defined HANFU fans, it involves taking the body as the center of experience and tracing the practices through which they make meaning, interpret the world, and position themselves. Also, the thick description requires the author to be reflexive about their own academic background. So in my case, my sociolinguistic training and the philosophic underpinnings of a contemporary Chinese maxim. So together they foreground the repertoire of concepts which will be used widely throughout my dissertation, such as social arrangements, agency, meaning-making, bodily practice, situated-ness, and semiosis and identity construction. The second theoretical line of this thesis is the adoption of a semiotic approach to HANFU. This approach allows me to question how HANFU becomes symbolic and indexical, and also to explore the emergence of meanings of HANFU and the intentions behind people who attribute these meanings to HANFU. Or put it simply, this approach highlights the interaction-oriented HANFU material culture, and particularly the meaning-based interaction between self-defined HANFU fans and HANFU itself. And these theoretical lines underpin 4 types of meaning-making practice of self-defined HANFU fans, such as speaking, writing, dressing, and branding, which will be elaborated on each empirical study. But before going into details of them, I would like to present my ethnographic fieldwork, which was conducted in 2 distinct geographic locations, Beijing, China, and the Netherlands. I employed participants' observation during my fieldwork in Beijing, China from September 2022 to January 2021. And my participant observation across online and offline channels, and the online channel was mainly based on the WeChat group chats. And during participant observation, I participated in self-defined HANFU fans' offline activities and their online interaction as well. I also employed the interviews, including semi-structured and unstructured ones, and took field notes. There are also the same techniques I also employed in my fieldwork in the Netherlands from March 2022 to August 2023. And during the fieldwork, I gathered a large body of multimodal data, which includes text, audio, and video recordings, photographs, and screenshots, and other visual materials which I encountered in the field, such as papers and brochures and some small mural things. And now I will present the results of each individual paper that makes up this dissertation. In the first study, the modern Asian Chinese, I employed the concept of a chronotype and scalar intimacy, and to focus on the narrative practice of self-defined HANFU fans, and through which the HANFU identity emerges in the context of a contemporary Chinese nationalism. Through analyzing 2 excerpts from interviews, and one is about HANFU attire in the HANFU revival, and the other is about Zuoyi gesture, I found self-defined HANFU fans, they through invoking and shifting back and forth among the multiple spatial temporal scales, and particularly through the invocation of the Great Asian China Chronotype, GACC, they succeed negotiating and enacting intimate identification among individuals, HANFU fan groups, and the Chinese people. In the second study, I turned my attention to the dressing practice of self-defined HANFU fans. I employed performativity and dress as a situated bodily practice to see how self-defined HANFU fans construct the different types of Chinese femininity. And in the first example, I present Dunhuang Banbi Tanning style of HANFU and the performance of traditional Chinese femininity. And in the second example, I show the cute femininity and Ming style HANFU. And in the last example, I present Feiyu Yesa style HANFU and Chinese style masculine femininity. Based on these examples, I conclude that dressing up in HANFU is a situated embodied practice, unifying the HANFU costume style, the gender construction, and corporeal acts. And also, Chinese femininity presented by HANFU is very complex, with both flexibility and internal conflicts. Like in each example, I highlight the ambivalent eminence in this performance of femininity, and they together reflect China's paradoxical modernization. Now, I turn to my third study in registering HANFU through language and clothing branding. And in this study, I focused on HANFU branding through analyzing the archaic linguistic features used in HANFU product description, the HANFU packaging, and a HANFU clothing label. I showed that HANFU branding links language, people, and HANFU material culture, creating the idea of archaic repertoire used by self-defined HANFU fans. And during this process, the HANFU is authenticated as appropriate traditional Chinese clothing. And also, authentic HANFU fan membership is constructed. In the last study, I juxtaposed the self-defined HANFU fans in Beijing, China, and in the Netherlands. I paid particular attention to their shared practice of stylizing Wenyan, the classical Chinese, and their pursuit of cultured identities. And in this shared practice and the pursuit of such identities help them distinguish themselves from other groups, and facilitating the formation of a global HANFU community of practice. Meanwhile, they render them, the self-defined HANFU fans, distinct from other Chinese migrants, and linking the cultured attribute to a new migratory identity. Well, to sum up, this dissertation contributes to both theoretical and methodological discussions. First is the concept of people-centered HANFU dynamics. The 4 empirical studies have shown how self-defined HANFU fans dynamically construct multiple identities and attribute diverse meanings to HANFU. In the first study, HANFU represents as an embodied and shared reality, which links self-defined HANFU fans to the connective Chinese identity. And in the second, the HANFU represents different forms of Chinese femininity. And in the third, it stands for the authentic HANFU fan membership. And in the final study, HANFU becomes a mark of cultural refinement and distinction among Chinese migrants. Second, this thesis shows that meaning-making bodily activities are both subjectively experienced and inscribed with sociocultural structures. So doing HANFU involves not only personal and corporeal experiences or acts, such as performing the Zuoyi gesture or living through migration, but it's also shaped by the larger forces like Chinese nationalism, modernization, and globalization. Third, this thesis also provides a vivid example of approaching identities through action. It doubts the static and essentialist categories imposed on self-defined HANFU fans, so it calls for a cautious and context-sensitive approach to them. Fourth, this study broadens the interdisciplinary understanding of style. So it connects the style in language to material culture. And in this sense, style is understood as a semiotic meta-activity that gives people's activities, practices, and social culture meanings. And fifth, this thesis challenges the dichotomy between internal and international migration by highlighting shared linguistic practices and the pursuit of a new migratory identity. Methodologically, this thesis demonstrates the value of juxtaposing 2 fields, like I present in my 4th empirical chapter, in 2 fields, like one in Beijing, China, one in the Netherlands, which makes both distinctive and shared characteristics more visible, such as the stylization of Wenyan across 2 contexts. This thesis also shows how HANFU fans' social interactions and relationships unfold in blended online and offline spaces. So this research calls for research methods that integrate both. Well, that is all about my presentation today, and thank you so much for your attention, and I'm looking forward the opponent's opinions, and yeah, now I give back the word to the prorector.
Many thanks for your presentation and finishing exactly at 4 o'clock because the independent bell ringing, so very good timing. So I would like to open the opposition by giving the floor to Professor Valentina Mazzucato, Professor in Globalization and Development. First to you.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I read your thesis on how self-identified HANFU fans shape their identities through discursive and material practices with great interest. When I was in China last year, I happened upon a HANFU catwalk. Yeah. And with your chapter, I understood that I hadn't understood anything while watching. All of the intimate, hand gestures, the gazes, the ways in which the clothing is worn, and also all that attention that goes into branding, on clothing labels, on packaging, on the online descriptions of these clothing. There's so many cues that come out of your dissertation, and these seemingly simple things that one can easily overlook. So I really read it with great fascination, and I can't wait to go back to China to see another HANFU catwalk. So my question relates to context of these practices, and especially to your trying to bring together the experiences of internal and international migrants. So in the first and the last empirical chapters, you explained the practices of HANFU fans as boundary making, so between them and other migrants. And that's also what you say makes, in a way, the commonality between the internal and the international migrants. So you're saying you're breaking this dichotomy between internal and international migrants. They're both somehow fighting against a kind of stereotype and creating a new identity. Yet, while I could imagine that in the Beijing case with internal migrants, that their public would pick up on these cues and understand the differences between these HANFU fans and other internal migrants. So this boundary making and this creation of themselves as distancing themselves to other migrants, that's clear to me. What was less clear was the Dutch case, because I didn't have enough context of the Dutch case. So it was not clear to me how Wen Yan, that you describe in chapter 7, how is that creating doing some kind of boundary making and making differences between different types of migrants? Because I'm imagining that the public that they need to distinguish themselves for or in front of are the Dutch, who are making all sorts of stereotypes that are lumping Chinese migrants are all the same, right? So doing Wen Yan is a way to distinguish themselves, but most Dutch people, I'm not Dutch, but still when I went to the catwalk, I didn't notice any of these things because I don't have that sensitivity. So can you explain to me how are HANFU practices, boundary-making practices in the Dutch case? So who are they performing for? And can you maybe give more context about the Dutch case to help us understand your interpretation?
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your question, highly esteemed opponent, and thank you for the opportunities. Let me have this opportunity to elaborate on it. I didn't write it on my thesis. And for the Dutch context, I understand that you are as a outside, as people from outside of a Chinese culture, you have no idea about Wen Yan, especially for associated with classical Chinese. But here I addressed this question, I indicated in my the fourth empirical chapter, because I said they doing this stylization, these linguistic practices, and their audiences is not the Dutch people. Their audiences are Chinese, so it is it's kind of inter-Chinese or intra-Chinese community. So they wish to distinguish from the previous generations of Chinese community, because from what I read from the histories in the Dutch history, there are the 4 waves of immigration from China, abroad China, and the first is from as a seller to come to the Netherlands, and then to become, and then it's the people is from the Indonesia or from Suriname. So the Chinese people come to the Netherlands, and then is from the Hong Kong and also from the other coastal cities of China. So and the 4th wave is exactly my participant involved in is they are all men from mainland China, and then because of the opening up policy and the reform, and so they can come here more equally ways to here to study, and to usually they come to the Netherlands to study for tertiary education, for the higher education, like for the college, and then they came here, and then they can came here for their job opportunity, for better job opportunities here. So then let's say can have a boundary between the 4th wave and the rest of the front 3 waves. So here is a boundary, because in the previous 3 waves immigration in the Netherlands, this group of people, they usually associated with low labor workers, and usually even here in the Netherlands, I can know some people here in the restaurant. They only work for the restaurants, for caterers and ethnic enclaves, such of associated this kind of stereotypes. So the key point for this 3 waves of previous 3 waves immigrants of Chinese immigrants, they are uneducated, and then they came here is like a more like in illegal way. But for this group of people, 4th waves, exactly my participant, they want to break this stereotype. And
Can I just follow up on that? Because so if they're trying to break a stereotype, then somehow they must be performing for the people who have that stereotype, to break the stereotype. Or are they just performing for themselves? That is, when they are doing these, are there people from the other waves there to see and to then realize, hey, they're different from us? Or are they doing it just for themselves? And then if they're doing it just for themselves, how is that breaking a stereotype?
I think the first things from based on my theoretical the stance is I more focus on is kind of the performance for themselves. But when you in the Dutch context, when you perform yourselves and you receive the gathers from the Dutch people, of course you cannot perform yourself in a vacuum room. Yeah, exactly. So so my stance is they perform for themselves, especially like a small group of people. But when they perform or they presenting themselves, they're looking forward to other Dutch people to make a distinguish between them and the previous immigrants, because and here is one point is usually normal Dutch people don't focus on them. If they really focus on them, means these Dutch people have some curiosity or some knowledge about Chinese culture. So this based on their assumption, okay, you focus on us, our own self-performance, and then you ask me question, which means you want to know, you already have some prior knowledge about us. So so my point is they more based on their performance for themselves, but they also like to project some other new identities and wish the outside Chinese community, like Dutch people, to know this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The opposition will now be continued by Professor Jos Zwanenberg, who is professor in diversity in language and culture at Tilburg University. The floor is to you.
Thank you. Dear candidates, first of all, I would like to congratulate you with your thesis, a fine piece of work and a joy to read. Congratulations. My question is about one of the theoretical concepts which is of importance in your study, namely nationalism, since you present HANFU as a symbol for nationalism, cultural nationalism. So, for example, in chapter 4, you present HANFU as traditional national clothing, as national dress. And as often in nationalism, HANFU refers to a glorious past. Now, next to nationalism, now I begin my question, you also used the term chauvinism 3 times in your book, which I understand or interpret as a more extreme form as nationalism, of nationalism, I should say. It implies a feeling of superiority, but you do not use patriotism. The third in line, which is a milder form of attachment, commitment to a nation. So patriotism is more about love and devotion and passion. And I was wondering if patriotism as a concept would have been of help in understanding the individual beliefs and experiences of young Chinese within the HANFU culture. So could you please elaborate on the concept of nationalism as you have used it, perhaps in relation to chauvinism, more extreme, and patriotism, more mild? That's my question.
Okay, thank you so much for your question, highly esteemed opponent, and thank you for reading so carefully to know the difference, the patriotism and the nationalism. Well, here maybe there are some difference between this, but because I am the inside of Chinese culture, so when I contact them and when I immersed myself in this context, the first things come into my mind is nationalism. Yeah, or not just because of my like political slogans or kind of educations, but also here's a big problem is before I went into this field, I read some scholars' studies about them. So I'm not the first person to do this, and many scholars they addressed just directly addressed this group of people associated with nationalism. So that's why it's a kind of I take it for granted at the first thought. And also, I think because I'm not very expert for patriotism and this kind of a difference, maybe I need to but it's possible in the future I can elaborate on this way. But patriotism for us in our culture is more like a government teaches you how to do this. And to be passionate and to be grateful to your countries provide you a lot of things. And because we have a patriotism education, but for the nationalism, why I adopted it's I want to adopt a kind of a more neutral stance to describe it nationalism. And I think nationalism encompasses more than patriotism. Yeah, so that's why I more to elaborate on the nationalism. Yes, some people elaborated on contemporary official Chinese nationalism as a culture nationalism because it is more focused on the traditional culture, emphasizes greatness to motivate this kind of growth of nationalism. But if I use patriotism, and then this kind of a culture elements will be missing. Yeah, so. But it is interesting in the future if I can look more nuanced the difference between these terms. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I follow your line of thinking, and they're just 3 concepts in a broader field, and there's different understandings of them, of course. But because of your explanation, I have a little follow-up question. Would you say that HANFU is typically, as a societal and cultural phenomenon, a bottom-up thing, or is there also something coming top-down from politics or important journalists, public intellectuals, the top-down level?
As I explicitly stated in my chronotype chapter, I said one of the contribution of this thesis is to adopt to bottom to up down to see, because usually nationalism, when people describe them, the many people will think the participants are kind of a passive response, is enforced by the larger social structures or by the other things to passively to respond to it. But here I want to show the peoples is especially for this generation, young Chinese, they are very active and they have their own agency, and they tend to adopt a collaborative manner to collaborate their own agency and also collaborate current status, political ideologies. So this is what I want to show them. This young group of Chinese, also include me, I am also this generation. So we are not passively receiver.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I now would like to give the floor to our guest online, to Professor Sonja Pritzker, who is professor in anthropology at the University of Alabama. The floor is to you.
Hi, Yan Jia, this is just such a joy and an honor to be part of your committee. Your dissertation was beautiful. Your writing is wonderful. I look forward to seeing anything you do in the future. My first question is a kind of brief question, but it is important because there are so many different types of migrants within China. And I'm wondering, to what extent is HANFU specifically appealing to migrants as a way to differentiate themselves from other migrants? And or to what extent is migration inherently related to a certain kind of population who is attracted to HANFU? In other words, highly educated, middle-class folks who have agency and are interested in enacting an embodied connection to culture.
Okay. Thank you so much for your question, highly esteemed opponent. And thank you for giving me the opportunities to elaborate on this information. I would say it's a bit kind of missing from my dissertation, but I can give some explanation here. Is for you said in the China there are many different types of migrants groups. Yes, but I would like to reframe it a bit based on my lived experience. Is because Chinese kind of a free migrants movement is officially started from the opening up policies, driving by the economy and pursue the better opportunities. So from since then is a kind of the first I would say generations, and usually the peoples come from the rural area region to the urban. So that's the general tendency. And then also still this tendency still keeps now, but then now is a kind of second generations. Is this group of people, some of they are like my participant in China, this immigrants and these migrants, they are grew up in the rural region or in the other region, but they immigrant to the Beijing. And their aim is for the better opportunities and for better education and for better living standards. So because I didn't do many democratic informations about migrants, this group of people in China. So what because this is a grassroots groups and there is currently no official statistic about them. So what I get their demographic informations is mostly is based on my observation and based on the presidents of associations. They give me the general informations is that they are young, so which means they are more like a second generations. Like post 1990s or post 1980s, like this group of people. And then they are usually, because of after opening up policies, and China also government have education expansion policy. So many people, they received more education than previous generations. So usually they are educated. I would say they have the primary education and they received. So when they came to the Beijing for the higher educations. So here is a key point is they are all educated, and here is one thing is for the democratic information for their age, for their the gender, or for the gender, like I said, is more makeup of the women's, make up the majority. And for the social class, it's hard to trace. Because for the social class, and is associated with your careers, your salaries, and associated with your family background. And this is a kind of information is more private for me to access, especially when you access to I access to them is through online community. So this is very private, so I don't have a kind of social class information about them. But I can find some hint. Is sometimes they shared information on the WeChat group, not just about the related to HANFU. They also shared their daily activities. Like I remember one person shared his the consuming expense through Alipay. So, and from what he shared, I mean, I only have one example, is his more money is based on the food consumption, and because there are different types of consumption in the Alipay if you look at them. So I assume they cannot be the very middle or lower a bit middle, like in the current in China. So this is my general kind of democratic information of current Chinese immigrants.
Yeah, it's important. I don't know if I have time. I would love to just post that, as the developer with Sabina Perino of the concept of scalar intimacy and the use of chronotopes, I was actually surprised not to see more of that in the Yan chapter. And I would love to hear either if you have anything prepared to say now, or I would love to see in future, how you might think about Yan as a kind of scalar intimacy that brings the past into the present in really powerful ways, right? Where, because scalar intimacy, you're spanning chronotopes and bringing the past into the present into the past, the past into the future. And I thought that there was a lot you could do with Yan. I don't fault you for not having the space to do it here. But I'd love to hear just even briefly if you've thought about, writing anything further on that.
Thank you so much for your question, and definitely, well, because in the first chronotope, the article, one of my very important findings is the generation of the Great Asian China, the GACC. So this is actually, I realized it can apply to many of my chapters. Yeah, but but I first what I'm thinking is first I already used it, and maybe later after my dissertation I can write more about it. But definitely here for the scalar intimacy, especially in China, I think because for scalar intimacy, more like you describe yourself and to make distinction and among the people and ideas and associated with public discourse, public domains. So this is a really currently very useful concept to do the further, I would say very associated with them. Yeah, and for the chronotope, definitely, yes. And scalar intimacy, of course.
Yeah, well, I'd love to see that in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. The opposition will now be continued by Dr. Daan Hovens, who is assistant professor in language, cultures and cultural diversity at Maastricht University. The floor is to you.
Okay. And first of all, also from my side, congratulations with this beautiful PhD dissertation. And I would like to ask you something about this notion of Tongpao. That's like a notion that you mentioned in your dissertation and also in your presentation just now, as this common term of address that people who wear HANFU that they use to refer to themselves or to each other. And I think from an ethnographic perspective, it's very interesting or very exciting always to look at how people refer to themselves, how they refer to other people. So I would like to know a little bit more about this term. I find it, for example, also interesting that you translate it as same rope. So same rope, as if they all wear the same clothes, but just on the surface it looks like they all wear very different clothes. So it's just like, what is the same rope here? And also, like, when I look it up in a dictionary, then it says like, oh, this term is actually also used in other contexts where people wear a uniform or when they wear the same robe. It's also used in the military, for example. So that's also like, okay, I find this link also kind of interesting. So I was just wondering, like, can you say a little bit more about what does this term mean? What are the possible social effects if you refer to yourself as Tongpao or to someone else as Tongpao? And also, like, why did you decide to refer to yourself as Baozi when you introduce yourself to potential research participants, like in your dissertation, when you share like this introduction message of yourself, you actually use this term to refer to yourself. Yeah. So I just wonder, like, what was the reasoning behind that? What is the reason why you would use that term in that situation?
Thank you so much for your question, esteemed opponent. Thank you for the opportunities for me to elaborate a bit more on this. Well, the Tongpao, I just in the PowerPoint I showed is a literal meaning is the same rope, but Tongpao is actually in the modern Chinese not often used. Even you check it, some people will say that it refers to the comrades in the militaries, but because it's originated from classical poetry. It's very ancient poetry, and it's derived from two sentences. It's like 鱼子同袍, and this poetry is derived from in the very ancient time, the Qing dynasty, and it's to prize the military soldiers. And they wear the same clothing, and they share the clothing together to show these soldiers they are unified together to fight. So this is original, its meanings, original meaning in that poetry. And then, but nowadays, Tongpao is more like they get them back, but index changes. It's because they are not military soldiers, and so but they combine this and Tongpao is to, like I said, in the same robe. Of course, it's the literally meaning is the same robe, but also to show we wear the same robe. But also I asked one question. I have participants about explanation about this term, and they said because at the first beginning when they started to wear this kind of a clothing, nobody understood them, and they received a lot of mocks from the others. And they use this term to show they are fighting. Yeah, fighting the others, not understanding of them. Yeah, so this is his answers to explanation to my question about Tongpao. And for the Paozi, so now you ask me this question is more like I ask my question myself in the 5 years ago why I did choose this addressing term. Because in the 5 years ago, I contacted them and I sent these messages when I drafting my research proposal. So I have anything about it. I just send the message to check whether if they exist in the Netherlands. So I think for Paozi, the first is Pao. It's derived from the Tongpao, their addressing term. So I pick up this Pao word and then to show to show closeness and to position myself inside of your group. Yeah, and why I didn't choose Tongpao, because I am actually not the member of them, but I added zi. It's a suffix. It's very common suffix in Chinese, and it's usually it's maybe to explain it very more simply. It's like a Dutch is little, nature is little. So I combine the Pao and Zi to show I'm little, but of course not little, to show I'm invulnerable. I'm vulnerable, and I'm not harmful. So I'm happy to join you, and I don't cause any harms to you. Especially, this is the first message I send them through online platform. So it's I have to be. I think at that time I have to be very cautious about, because if I say some offended them, and then that door shuts it down. Yeah, so that's my kind of a strategy I used him 5 years ago. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Lauren Wagner, who is Associate Professor in Cultural Diversity in Diasporic Mobilities at Maastricht University.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you also from my part for this book. And I do want to express my admiration in the way that you went about this research, in the sense that you've managed to find such concrete and robust microanalytical data, so such fascinating things to talk about, and bring into conversation with so many different disciplines, that you're really connecting, for example, style as a keyword that cuts across sociolinguistics and other frameworks where it brings in new ways of thinking, hopefully ways of thinking that are kind of being more picked up in terms of materiality and how this translates into our communicative lives. So I congratulate you so much on that, because I can imagine it was an enormous task. I think my question though goes to a more fundamental aspect of doing this research, because being a person who's not so familiar with China, with HANFU, and kind of wondering what sort of presence it has in a cultural landscape, like whether it's something that as an ordinary person walking on the street I might be aware of, or how it's emerged. One of the questions that kept repeating in my mind while reading the book was, what is at stake in doing HANFU? So is this something that can be considered challenging to a regime? Is it something, and I think about this also in relation to some of the comments, that occasionally there would be a line or a footnote or something about how the organizations that are made up by HANFU participants are not or are recognized by the government, or that they are in what way they operate or how they might be respected. I also noticed in the conclusions, so on page 153, you're drawing a kind of strong argument on the danger of categorizations, and how categorizations can kind of pigeonhole, so it made me kind of wonder if there is something consequential in particular to doing HANFU that could be dangerous, or that could be challenging. For me, this also relates to this question of why focus on this particular kind of cultural production as being the site where you see all of these interconnections. Is that part of it? So.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question, esteemed opponent. So I assume you want me to elaborate on kind of more broad implications from this is very harmful as an illustrative case. Yeah. So first, I want to explain a bit. Is if you read all of my articles and my layout, you will realize that my intention is really put this group of people into the center of academic inquiry. I want them to become my main actor in my book. It's because of I'm not the first people to study them, but I am the first people to focus on them, practices systematically way. And also, I also want to respond to say kind of a categorization and what kind of challenges or risks about this is why do I raise this kind of I say to be cautious about categorization or labeling of this group of people is I want to raise the awareness for current or following researchers to let them know there is other possibilities to research this group of people, because as I answered previous questions, as before I went into this field, I read many scholars' articles, and they many based on subculture frameworks or nationalism from the political frameworks, and this. Of course, they doing so it has sense and is reasonable. But this way, in one way, is really prevent the people out of this group of people don't know this group of people's multi-dimensional lives. Actually, their lives are colorful, and we should present it. But if follow the previous way to categorize them, and then most of people don't know them. And also it's also raised awareness for the following researchers is there are other disciplines you can approach. So what I want to emphasize here is not about them to specialize in this group of people, because as researchers, when we study to research some participants, and it's very common we labeling them or categorize them. But then we have to be realized is this is my own thought. Is there if a lot of people just focus or following on your field and the other senior scholars will dare to follow to start from other disciplines. So this is my very initial the point. So I'm not against the categorization. It's very common in sociology or philosophy. So this is two ways I want to show. But and then come back to the more broad implications. Well, I didn't explicitly state it in my dissertation, but I do indicate it in the introduction chapter of my most empirical studies. Like in the first chronotope chapter, in the introduction, I stated this study is an illustrative case for studying nationalism, such a big social structure from down to top, this kind of approach. And also, and in my methodology part, actually, I also released the information is because in the methodology part, I stated why I decided to study them, not just in China, but also in the Westland to abroad, because this kind of newly emergent phenomenon is kind of transnational, I would say, but of course, I have to say it in a nuanced way. This phenomenon, this group of people, now they emergent, so I want to throw this way and to bring the more highlights, more focus on this kind of a transnational use activities. And also in my catwalk chapters, in the introduction part, I stated this group of people, the women account for the largest, the majority of the people. And so from my perspective is I want to contribute a bit like a feminist studies currently in these newly phenomenons. So I didn't explicitly indicate it the broad implications, but I did release the information throughout my thesis. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. We still have time for a second round of questions, and I would like again to give the floor to one of our guests, Professor Zwanenberg.
So I'll go first. Yes, so my second question, dear candidate, is a quite brief question about methodology, more specifically on dealing with the context of online interaction. Mm-hmm. So where you provide great detail in your methodology paragraphs on the offline part of your studies, the report is sometimes a bit brief on the online part, not in content, no, but in context. An ethnography on digital discourse analysis would be more informative, to my opinion, when, for example, metadata are provided. So this gives insight in the uptake of the digital interaction. The uptake of posted messages tells us something about the dynamics within the group on the digital level. Even just adding numbers of members of chat groups or replies to posts is already insightful for the impact of a posted message. So my question therefore is, why did you not provide systematically the metadata, such as numbers of accounts which are involved in the digital interaction that you've analyzed?
Thank you so much for your questions, High Estimate Opponent. So you wish me to elaborate more on the online context I didn't provide. Well, for the first things is I doing ethnography by myself. My ability is really limited, and because the online chat or online informations are, you cannot get immediate data at first place, and also considering at that time, especially when I was in China, I also doing the part-time job to support myself to doing the research. So so it's really it's my ability limited to provide such informations. But
is the access limited to such data?
Yes, a kind of access. Also, my energy is problems. To be honest, it's a bit hard, and especially during the COVID, it's really distracting. But I want to ask more specifically. You want me to provide more concrete what kind of information you want to get or want me to elaborate on?
If we have a certain posted message which is replied upon by just one person or not replied upon at all, it still is part of the interaction.
Yeah.
We do not see very much actual interaction going on. If there's like 20 or even 100 replies, then we actually see a lot of interaction going on. It's all digital interaction, it's all open for our analyses, but the meaning is different because people are not responding or responding very often.
Okay. Yeah, indeed. Is this kind of interactions makes difference. Well, because of my focus at that time is I have a very general, because when I focus on the online interactions is for the implement their offline activities. So the online is not my main focus, or the offline is not my main focus. I always try to find the connection between online and the offline. If there is connection, I will focus on online, and of course, or the offline. But there is no connection between both. Then I would say at that time I didn't pay a lot of attention, because also it's determined by my researcher question. At the first beginning, I just focus on their practices, and then that is really determined by research questions, and my focus attention is I want to see the interconnection between both, not just one side. And one side, of course, is my energy is not enough.
Very much in favor of that, because what we do online has repercussions offline and the other way around. So we should not separate them. So thanks for your question.
Thank you. We still have time for, well, at least one question. I don't know whether there will be much time for an answer, but I would like to again pass the floor to Professor Pritzker.
I'm okay. I squeezed both of my questions in earlier, so I'll hand it to someone else who still has a burning question.
So Matsukato, would you like to?
Okay, very quickly. So I feel that you have a lot of ethnographic data that you probably didn't use.
Yeah.
Because of maybe your sociolinguistic focus.
Yeah.
If you were to write a paper where to use more of your ethnographic data and maybe leave aside the sociolinguistics, sorry, what would you write about? What would you write about? What's your next paper? What could be the next paper where you use your ethnographic data?
Actually, I have many ideas because of the time limited. I have to finish dissertation very quickly. But I have some ideas focused on their gestures. It's really fascinating for me, especially to focus on when as I said, in the limitation and the future studies, I mentioned that they are posing for the taking photos, because this is a very important activity for them. So if I would do this research continually, I will study on their posing and their gestures, taking photos. Of course, in my catwalk data I presented their gestures and their other embodied activities, but I really want to elaborate on these other sides more further. But also, maybe I have a very big idea is I want to focus on their smell. Because many of female participants, so they are, because especially during the offline activities, usually they make up very well and dress very well. So when you're close to them, you smell very good away. So I want to see how this the female participant to present, because also even female participants construct the majority, but there are also male participants. So if possible, I would like to go further about masculinity in their catwalk. I do have a data, and I have some thoughts about masculinity. And so if I,
Interesting.
yeah,
And all the judges seemed male. I don't know if that's the case, but in your pictures, the judges are men.
yes,
And
yeah, most of the men, yeah.
Hora est. Dear Yan Jia, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed, so the degree committee will now discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company now leave this room, and after the deliberation, the beadle will come and collect you to return to this room. Thank you very much.
Please all rise. Please be seated.
Yan Jia, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. And in view of the positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Cornifs is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor now to take the floor.
Please all rise.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times? To be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Yan Jia, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. And as evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Yes. Come here, please. Okay, so comes. This is yours. Okay, I keep it like this.
Oh, I give them my pamphlet.
Oh, the parent.
Please be seated.
Maybe we can stand here instead of in a corner. Dear young doctor, dear Jan, it's a true honor to be here today as your promoter at your defense. I warmly congratulate you on your wonderful thesis and also extend my congratulations to your family, your mother and your grandmother, who unfortunately cannot be here. Present live at this momentous occasion. Your partner, your friends, your family, colleagues, everyone. I also congratulate you on behalf of the co-promoter Susanne Aarberse, University of Amsterdam, and of course Professor Anneke Smeding from the Radboud University. So now we mark the successful completion of a dissertation and an intellectual path that has led here. And at the center of this work lies a very simple, it seems a very simple question, not what is HANFU, but what are self-defined HANFU fans doing? And this perspective guides the whole study. So you show that HANFU is not only a garment, it's not only a tradition, but something lived and practiced, embodied, performed, narrated, branded and stylized in daily life. Dear Jan, from the first moment we spoke over Zoom, I don't know, you in Beijing, I in Amsterdam, you have shown extraordinary talent, discipline and perseverance. And when you finally arrived in Maastricht after a successful round for the Chinese scholarship, you came entirely on your own to a university and a country that were in lockdown because of COVID. And for months, for many months, You had to work in complete isolation. Fortunately, the faculty was able to offer you a workplace in a building that was otherwise closed. No one was there. Jan was there. You were there. But still, starting your PhD journal in such circumstances was far from expected. And I really admire you for going through the COVID period so much on your own. I still vividly remember how happy we both were when travel slowly resumed and we could finally meet each other in person for the first time on the Dam Square in Amsterdam. You were there with a friend, you remember?
Yes.
And I heard you calling Professor, because I didn't see you, but there was a voice. Hello, Professor. So your first year was spent processing all the research data you had collected in Beijing. That was already impressive. And above all, working on your very first article. You produced many versions of that article, you remember? But once you discovered how to shape a publication in both form and content, you became unstoppable. One published article after another rolled out over the years in international respected journals. And what struck me in your writings is that the feedback from journal reviewers were always praiseworthy and constructive, something I have rarely seen. So now reviewers be here. You grew so quickly as a researcher that in fact over the past 2 years we hardly needed to supervise you anymore. We would discuss a possible perspective, you would take it on, adapt it as you saw fit, and then produce beautiful analytical articles, and which have now come together in the dissertation. So your fieldwork took you from Beijing to the Netherlands, from public parades and cultural gatherings to online chat groups and catwalk performances. Through detailed ethnography, both online and offline, you shed light on how young HANFU fans create meaning, negotiate identities, and bring past and present into dialogue. It's impressive. You demonstrate how a gesture, such as a specific greeting, carries cultural memory and political resonance. How wearing HANFU gives shape to different versions of femininity and masculinity, we just hear. And smell. How branding and archaic language establish authenticity and achieve belonging. And how in migration context, HANFU becomes part of constructing a cultural identity and a sense of home. A striking aspect of your work is how you continually connect the individual and the collective. You often talked about that this is your Chinese upbringing, to connect both the individual and the collective. You were very eager to do so. So a single gesture, a choice of clothing, a way of speaking is never only personal. It's always linked to collective identities, whether of HANFU associations or Chinese femininity or the broader national or migratory communities. So this interplay between the personal and the collective has become a milestone in your dissertation. Now about social linguistics. So your dissertation also connects with a well-known reference point in social linguistics. Penelope Eckert's jokes and burnouts. I'm looking at Professor Swanenberg because he knows. So Eckert demonstrated how clothing and language together create social categories, an insight that has shaped what we call third wave social linguistics. But your work develops this tradition further, I think. You place embodiment at the center, treating clothing, gesture, and the body itself as semiotic resources. So you resist fixing groups into rigid categories, instead de-essentializing them more radically. And by combining together the fieldwork in Beijing and the Netherlands, you extend the analysis into transnational identity making, whereas earlier studies, like the jokes and the burnouts, were more locally focused. So in this way, your research moves the third wave forward. May I say so? I think so. I would defend this view after your thesis toward a more multimodal, embodied and global understanding of identity as practice. And also a strength of your work is that you avoid reducing HANFU fans to easy labels. Yan, it really has such a joy to supervise you. You combine intellectual curiosity with a great discipline and independence, but also with kindness and modesty. You have shown resilience in difficult circumstances, creativity in your research, and determination in your writings. I'm confident that these qualities will carry you far in your future career, whether in academia or beyond, and I hope you will continue to follow your passion for research, and I hope that there will be a postdoc position in the Netherlands for you.
Thank you.
Oh. So, dear Dr. Yan, on behalf of myself, the co-supervisors, the faculty, and all those who have followed your journey, I congratulate you wholeheartedly again. It has been an honor to be your promoter, and all three of us wish you the very best in everything that lies ahead.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you.
Dear Dr. Yan Jia, I would like to also congratulate you on behalf of Maastricht University, and hereby also conclude this session. Could I ask the audience to leave the room and go to the reception, which will take place in the Refter? And we will also, as a committee, join Professor Pritzker together with the Rome doctor for a picture.
Please all rise. Yeah.